Arrogance, fraud, and a stunning downfall. How one man's wealth couldn't save him from justice. The courtroom buzzed like a hive of restless bees, tension crackling in the air. Every bench was packed, shoulder to shoulder, with people whose eyes darted toward the defendant's table. Whispers spread like wildfire, each rumor more scandalous than the last. Then he walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a charcoal gray designer suit, the man carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His slicked-back hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and he smirked at the crowd as if they had gathered to admire him, not to judge him. Lucas Bennett, the name that had dominated headlines for weeks, looked more like a guest of honor than a defendant accused of stealing millions from struggling families. But it wasn't his entrance that turned heads. It was what happened next. When Judge Margaret Hayes entered the courtroom, dressed in her black robe, the atmosphere shifted. She moved with quiet authority, her presence commanding respect without a word. Her reputation preceded her. A no-nonsense judge who valued justice above all else. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Hayes," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood, everyone except Lucas Bennett. The room fell silent. All eyes shifted to the defendant, who remained seated, casually flipping through a legal pad as though the proceedings were a trivial inconvenience. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Lucas waved him off with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Judge Hayes paused at her bench, her piercing gaze fixed on Lucas. Her face betrayed nothing, but the silence grew heavier with every passing second. A murmur rippled through the crowd, the disbelief palpable. Who does this guy think he is? But Lucas didn't flinch. His expression was smug, almost daring the judge to react. "You may be seated," Judge Hayes said, her voice calm but firm. She didn't address the slight, not yet, but the tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't just palpable now, it was suffocating. And this was only the beginning. Lucas Bennett was about to learn the hard way that even the wealthiest and most entitled are not above the law. Lucas Bennett wasn't just any wealthy man. He was the kind of rich that made headlines. Luxury yachts, multi-million-dollar mansions on both coasts, private jets, and parties that could rival celebrity galas. His business empire, Bennett Capital, had once been touted as a beacon of financial success. But behind the glitz and glamour lay a darker truth. Lucas's rise to the top had been built on deception. He'd convinced small business owners and middle-class families to invest their life savings into fraudulent schemes, promising them a chance to secure their futures. Retirement accounts, college funds, even entire family inheritances, gone in the blink of an eye. The fallout was devastating. Families lost their homes, parents struggled to feed their children. Elderly couples faced the terrifying prospect of living out their final years in poverty. The ripple effects of his greed spread far and wide. But to Lucas, it was just business. When investigators finally caught up to him, the evidence was staggering. Bank records, falsified documents, and testimony from former employees painted a damning picture. Yet even with the walls closing in, Lucas remained confident. "I've got the best lawyers money can buy," he told reporters outside his mansion in Malibu. "This will blow over. It always does." And for a while, it seemed he might be right. His legal team filed motion after motion, delaying the trial for months. They painted him as a misunderstood entrepreneur, a scapegoat for the failures of others. But no amount of legal maneuvering could erase the mountain of evidence or the heartbreak of his victims. By the time the trial finally began in New York City, the courtroom was packed daily with people seeking justice, or at least some semblance of it. Among them was Maria Sanchez, a widowed mother of 3 who had lost her home after investing with Lucas. Her youngest daughter, Sophia, had been forced to drop out of college. Sitting beside her was James Carter, a retired firefighter who had spent decades saving for retirement, only to end up living in his brother's spare room. Their stories, and countless others, were shared in gut-wrenching detail during the trial. Maria's voice broke as she described the day she realized she couldn't make the mortgage payment. "I begged them not to take the house," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But they didn't care. My kids had to sleep in our car for 2 weeks. Do you know what that feels like?" James's testimony was just as harrowing. "I spent 35 years running into burning buildings," he said, his voice heavy with anger. "And this man, he burned my future to the ground without a second thought." But through it all, Lucas sat there, unbothered. He often leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone or whispering jokes to his attorney. To him, these were just stories, irrelevant noise that wouldn't change the outcome he believed was already in his favor. The press ate it up. Headlines screamed about his arrogance, his lack of remorse, and the bold disrespect he'd shown to the court. Public opinion was turning against him, but Lucas didn't care. As far as he was concerned, public opinion didn't write checks. His lawyer tried to spin the narrative. "Mr. Bennett deeply regrets any hardship caused," the attorney said during a press conference. "But he remains confident that the truth will prevail." The truth, however, was that Lucas had no intention of admitting guilt. He was betting on the system bending in his favor, like it always had before. But this time, there was one factor Lucas hadn't accounted for. Judge Margaret Hayes wasn't like the people he was used to dealing with. The trial was a spectacle. News vans lined the streets outside the courthouse, reporters jostling for position to capture every detail. Inside, the tension only grew as the days dragged on. Witness after witness took the stand, each one adding another nail to Lucas Bennett's metaphorical coffin. But it wasn't just the testimonies that drew gasps from the audience. It was Lucas's behavior. On the third day of the trial, the prosecution presented damning evidence, a series of emails where Lucas explicitly instructed his team to falsify records and mislead investors. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor read his words aloud. "Make the numbers look good. We need these suckers to sign on the dotted line." The words hung in the air like poison. Maria Sanchez, sitting in the front row, shook her head in disbelief. James Carter clenched his fists. "And Lucas?" He smirked. The prosecutor turned toward him, her voice sharp. "Mr. Bennett, do you recognize this email?" His lawyer jumped in before he could answer. Objection. This question has been asked and answered in pre-trial hearings. Judge Hayes raised a hand, her expression calm but firm. Overruled. The defendant will answer the question. Lucas leaned into the microphone, his tone dripping with condescension. "Yes, I recognize it. But let's not pretend it means what you're implying. It's just business talk. You wouldn't understand." The crowd erupted in whispers, and the judge's gavel struck like a thunderclap. "Order in the court," Judge Hayes commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. She turned her attention back to Lucas. "Mr. Bennett, I advise you to watch your tone. This is not a boardroom meeting." But Lucas didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed amused, like this was all just an elaborate game. As the trial continued, his arrogance only grew. He interrupted witnesses with sarcastic chuckles, rolled his eyes during cross-examinations, and whispered loudly to his lawyer during key moments. The audience watched in disbelief as he treated the courtroom like his personal stage. Then came the day of Maria Sanchez's testimony. She stepped up to the stand, clutching a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. Her voice was shaky as she began, but her words carried the weight of her pain. "I trusted him," she said, looking directly at Lucas. "I trusted him with everything I had, and he destroyed my family's future." Lucas didn't even look at her. He leaned back in his chair, casually scrolling through his phone. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interrupted, pointing toward Lucas. "The defendant is clearly not paying attention to the witness." All eyes turned to Judge Hayes. Her face was impassive, but her eyes burned with quiet fury. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice measured, "put your phone away. Now." Lucas glanced up, unfazed. "I was just checking something important," he said, holding up the device as if to prove his point. The judge's tone hardened. "I said now." For a moment, it seemed like he might argue. But then, reluctantly, he set the phone down. The tension in the room was palpable, but the damage was already done. Maria's testimony continued, but her voice carried a tremor of disbelief, as though she couldn't fathom the lack of basic human decency. By the end of her statement, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except for Lucas's. The prosecution rested its case a week later, leaving the defense to make their move. Lucas's lawyer tried everything, discrediting witnesses, twisting the narrative, even painting Lucas as a victim of overzealous prosecutors. But the cracks were too big to cover. Through it all, Judge Hayes maintained her composure. She rarely spoke, but her presence loomed over the room like a steady, unwavering force. It was clear to everyone watching that her patience with Lucas's antics was wearing thin. The trial reached its final day. The air in the courtroom was electric, the anticipation almost unbearable. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens poised and cameras ready. The gallery was packed with victims, their faces a mix of anger and hope. All eyes were on Judge Margaret Hayes as she prepared to deliver the sentence. Lucas Bennett sat at the defense table, his posture as relaxed as ever. He even had the audacity to flash a small grin to the cameras as they captured his every move. He didn't look like a man about to face judgment. He looked like a man convinced he'd already won. When Judge Hayes finally spoke, the room fell silent. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice steady and deliberate, "you have been found guilty on all counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the testimonies of your victims paint a clear picture of your actions. You manipulated, exploited, and destroyed the lives of countless people, all for personal gain." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The judge continued, "Throughout this trial, you have shown a blatant lack of remorse. Your behavior in this courtroom has been nothing short of disgraceful. You have insulted your victims, disregarded this court's authority, and treated these proceedings as if they were beneath you." The crowd murmured in agreement. Maria Sanchez, sitting in the front row, clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. Judge Hayes's tone shifted, becoming colder. "Justice, Mr. Bennett, is not about wealth, power, or privilege. It is about accountability. And today, you will face the consequences of your actions." The room was so quiet you could hear the faint rustling of paper. Lucas's smirk faltered for the first time as he straightened in his chair. "Therefore," the judge declared, "I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Lucas's face froze, the blood draining from his cheeks. 30 years. He'd been expecting a slap on the wrist, maybe a few months in a cushy facility. But this? This was unheard of for someone of his stature. Judge Hayes wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate liquidation of your assets to repay the victims of your crimes. Every dollar you stole will be returned to the families you devastated." The courtroom broke into stunned murmurs. Maria Sanchez pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. James Carter leaned back in his seat, his eyes wide with disbelief. Lucas shot up from his chair, his face red with anger. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice echoing in the room. "I'm Lucas Bennett. You can't treat me like some common criminal." Judge Hayes's gavel slammed down, her expression unyielding. "Mr. Bennett, sit down." But Lucas wasn't finished. "This is a joke. I'll appeal this. I'll have your career ruined, Judge." The bailiffs moved closer, ready to intervene. Judge Hayes remained calm, her voice cutting through his outburst like a knife. "This is my courtroom, Mr. Bennett, and you will show respect." Bailiffs escort the defendant out. As he was led away, Lucas continued to protest, his voice growing fainter with each step. The courtroom erupted into applause, something that rarely happened, but felt entirely appropriate in the moment. Judge Hayes turned to the audience, her expression softening just slightly. "Justice has been served," she said. "Let this be a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law." But as the courtroom emptied and the cameras outside began flashing, one question lingered in everyone's minds. Would this sentence be enough to truly change a man like Lucas Bennett? The courtroom was nearly empty now, save for a few lingering reporters and victims gathering their belongings. The buzz of excitement still hung in the air, but for those directly affected by Lucas Bennett's crimes, the emotions were more complex. Maria Sanchez stood by the courthouse steps, clutching her purse tightly. A reporter approached her with a microphone. "How do you feel after today's verdict?" Maria hesitated, then said, "I feel relieved, but the truth is, no sentence will erase the damage he caused. My kids and I are still rebuilding, but at least now we have hope." Nearby, James Carter was speaking with a friend. "It's not just about the years he's getting," he said, shaking his head. "It's about the message. People like him think they're untouchable. Today proves they're not." Inside her chambers, Judge Margaret Hayes sat quietly, staring out the window at the commotion below. She didn't feel triumph or victory, just a steady resolve. Her role wasn't about personal satisfaction. It was about ensuring fairness, about reminding everyone that the scales of justice could balance even against the weight of wealth and privilege. Lucas Bennett's name would continue to make headlines for a while, but for the people he had wronged, the chapter was finally closing. The financial restitution would help many of them start over, but the scars he left behind would take longer to heal. As the weeks passed, the story sparked conversations across the country. It became a rallying cry for accountability, for holding those in power to the same standards as everyone else. People shared their own stories of injustice, drawing strength from the verdict. But perhaps the most powerful moment came from Maria's youngest daughter, Sophia, who wrote a letter to Judge Hayes that was later published in a local newspaper. "Thank you for standing up for my family," it read. "Thank you for showing us that people like Lucas Bennett can't get away with hurting people like us. You didn't just give us justice, you gave us a second chance." The story of Lucas Bennett's trial was more than just a courtroom drama. It was a reminder of the resilience of ordinary people, the importance of integrity, and the belief that justice can and should prevail, no matter the odds. So as you sit with this story, ask yourself, what does accountability mean to you? And in your own life, how can you ensure that fairness and justice are not just ideals, but actions? Because in the end, justice isn't just the responsibility of the courts. It's something we all have to fight for every day.